Hey guys, good morning and welcome. This is Primus Veku, and this is Primus Learning. In this tutorial, we will be using Terraform to create a serverless Jenkins environment on AWS ECS Fargate. There will be two components to our Jenkins environment, the Jenkins controller and the Jenkins agents. The controller, as it sounds, is the central server that is used to control the Jenkins environment. You can think of this as the controller as your typical Jenkins server. The agents are containers that we will use to run our Jenkins jobs. When we kick off a job, the controller will spin up an agent or an agent container to run the job. And once that job is completed, the agent container will be terminated. I'll walk you step by step through these various tools that we'll be creating in AWS. You have EFS, you have ECS clusters, you will have secrets, you would have a lot of other things, right? And at the end of this project, you should be able to implement a serverless Jenkins environment at work. Thank you so much, and let's dive right in. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Primus Learning again. Excited to have you join us here. Sorry if my volume is different. I'm testing out my microphones, my new microphones that I just bought. So anyway, excited to have you join us. Today, we'll be provisioning a serverless Jenkins environment in AWS using Terraform. This is a really complete tutorial. So I want to shout out to this guy, Matt Little. I'm leveraging his article to do this video. So I'm leveraging part of his article. You see he has an architecture diagram here. And what he's doing is, it's similar to this, but we have additions that we've made using another article, right? This article here by AWS. So shout out to the AWS team also. It is a similar architecture, right? But there are some differences. So this one is building a serverless Jenkins environment on AWS Fargate. So we use AWS ECS tool using the Fargate service to build a serverless Jenkins environment. What do I mean by serverless Jenkins environment? I mean that your Jenkins environment would be dependent on a controller service or a controller agent, and also the Jenkins agents. So we have different agents. The Jenkins controller, which will be controlling whatever jobs, whatever thing will be run in the Jenkins agent. So we have a controller and an agent. So normally the agents will not be running, right? So we have two clusters, two ECS clusters, one controller agent, one controller cluster, and one agent cluster. So there are two clusters, as you could see in this architecture. The AWS team here is using an application load balancer on top of it. This is deployed in different availability zones. They have some certificates that are stored in AWS, or they have generated certificates, right, that will be used in conjunction with the DNS name for this application. We will not use Route 53 because we will not include the DNS point. We'll use a load balancer, and that load balancer will just test our application using the DNS endpoint. So this AWS architecture uses a certificate. We will not do that. And of course, we'll have a load balancer on top of it. You see HTTPS request here. Ours will just be HTTP because we will not have a certificate on top of it. And you can see the Jenkins controller right here. It's built with EFS. So our example, we use EFS as the storage. So our jobs in Jenkins will be stored in an EFS system. That's what we'll use. And also they are using ECS for the clusters. So these are clusters, and they have a Jenkins controller here. They have the Jenkins controller, and they have even an AWS backup architecture somewhere here. So the Jenkins agents, this is their Jenkins agents here, and so on. What would they do? They will build an image of the Jenkins controller and an image of the Jenkins agent. We will build these images, and these are the images that will be running as tasks in our ECS environment. And once you build a job, you pick up that image. So the good thing with this is once your pipeline or your job completes running, the agents that it uses disappears, or it is destroyed, right? After running your job, that agent dies. So that agent, the Jenkins agent, dies. That saves a lot of cost, right? That's the advantage of serverless. This means only the controller will be available. The Jenkins agent will not be available. The services or the tasks will not be running. So they will only run when you have a job that is running in Jenkins, in your Jenkins environment. So this is how this looks. So I've adopted some of the things here and some of them here. So he's using ECR, I'm using ECR. He's using EFS as well. And you see the Jenkins Jenkins controller as well, and then the Jenkins agent. This is the cluster. This is the cluster. And then this is a Jenkins agent that we're running every job. He's using Cloud Map. We're using this to link up the controller and the agent so the two can work together. So he has an application load balancer on top of it, and of course, internet gateway that is coming in. So it's a similar architecture that we're using to develop to develop this. So you guys, I'll post this article on the description section so you can take a look at it. He has the some of the code. I use some of this code to modify and have my environment. So shout out to Matt Little for putting this article together. It's really very neat. All right. So thanks guys for joining me. Let's walk through. I'll just share my screen on this Jenkins or serverless Jenkins Terraform so that we walk through what I have built here. All right, so I'll just explain each of these files. I'll explain them and walk you through step by step how you could do this, and we'll run this and make sure it's working as expected. So this is a complete project that you can use and build a Jenkins environment at work. I actually have implemented this at work, guys. So this is a complete end-to-end. The only thing that I've not added here is the DNS name using Route 53, and of course the certificate. So ours will not be secure, but typically you could do that. And even also authentication, you could use something like Azure single sign-on or Azure directory and simply enable it with this. I think in the next video I can add that part, right, and just do Active Directory and add some login so that you're able to log in with current Active Directory users in your organization. So guys, this is a complete end-to-end video. Please don't forget to like and share a YouTube video, and let's build this platform together. All right, and also make video recommendations on what you want us to talk about in our next videos, and we will be glad to do that for you. Okay, so let's get into this. So we have I'll put this in a repository and share with you guys. So we have the serverless Jenkins Terraform folder. Inside this folder, we have other folders, right? See how there are two folders. There's the Docker folder, because we will be building a Docker image or Docker images. We'll build two Docker images. One would be for the controller image, and the other will be for the agent's image. So inside the Jenkins the Docker, we have two folders, the Jenkins agent and then the Jenkins controller. So see what is inside the Jenkins agent. We just have the Jenkins image that will be built, right? So we'll build a Jenkins image for the Jenkins agent. So this is just pulling Jenkins from Docker Hub, I think. All right, and then this is the official Jenkins image, right, for this architecture. Then the next one down here is the Jenkins controller. You see it has some default files, but we'll just look at a couple of them. We have this file here called the Docker file, you know, the Docker file is used to build images, right? We use this Docker file to build our image. So of course, we are pulling the official Jenkins image from Docker Hub, and then we are setting up our environment here. You see, we have to, our Jenkins environment has to have a username and a password. So we are setting it up here as variables, right? And this is the variables we are simply passing here. And then other things down here that we're doing, we are setting up all of these Jenkins files because we use this Jenkins YAML file here to set up this environment. And so these are certain things that we want to do. We want to simply copy some plugins that are needed for our Jenkins environment. The plugins are found in this file, and that's why you see us pointing to the plugins down here, right? You see we are copying the plugins to the Jenkins environment. You see the copy, we copy the Jenkins file as well. And down here, we are simply running to build on this, right? So you can see this down here, we're using the Jenkins user to run the file, that is will be created. After this, you'll see a file here that will be created called a jenkins.yaml file. That is simply the YAML file for this Jenkins environment. And then you're simply running this also to install all the plugins into your Jenkins using the Jenkins CLI. So this is what this Jenkins controller image would be. So we'll be building the Jenkins image, right? We'll be building that Jenkins image. So we have a folder. So this is the first folder. This was called the Jenkins or the Docker folder, right? And then we have the next folder. This is simply the Terraform folder. It has Terraform code to build everything, and it has the task definitions for this environment. You remember AWS ECS would run, you run your applications using task definitions on ECS. And that's why we've defined a task definition file. Is simply a template that we use to build our Jenkins environment. It simply contains details about the various tasks that will be running. So the controller, the controller ports and everything that will be running, right? It's like if you go into the AWS environment and you're clicking to create a deployment on ECS, you set up all of these things, right? So this is the template that we just set up here. All right. And so I'll pull down this task manager. The rest of the things are just the Terraform code, that is building this environment for us. So what do we have inside this Terraform code? We have cloud map, which you saw in the diagram, which I showed you earlier. This cloud map is simply connecting your, your controller to your agents, right? This cloud map helps configure and create a DNS namespace for your environment and connects your controller to your agents. And then CloudWatch here is just services that we are, just log groups that we're creating, in order to get logs from our application. ECR TF file. So this file is simply the repository where our image will be pushed, right? So we'll have a controller repository and we'll have a Jenkins repository. So you are creating these two repositories here. And then we are grabbing the repo endpoints and setting them up, right? So we're getting the repository endpoints and setting them up in our local environment so that we'll be able to push images to our AWS environment, right? So this is absolutely important. Some of the prerequisites that you need to have, I forgot to mention this at the start of this video. The first thing is that you need to have Docker installed, and JQ has to be installed as well. Docker and JQ are needed. And this may not run very well on a Mac, on a Windows machine. I'm using a MacBook. So this may have challenges running on Windows because you probably not be able to install JQ correctly and other dependencies, right? So you need this. And then down here, we just have our Jenkins controller configurations. And we created these configurations, of course, in the Jenkins. These configurations will be brought to us back in the Jenkins.yaml file, right? So you see a Jenkins.yaml file when all of these things have been created, and you get details about the region, you get details about the Jenkins controller port and every other thing in your Jenkins file. Down here, we are also just creating, we'll be building the image, right? You see, build and push the image. So we'll build the image. This depends on the local file that will be that has been configured up there, and then we have a provisional, which is just the build image. So we are using Bash to build and push an image to our controller environment, and we'll be pushing it to where? We'll be pushing it to we'll be pushing it to ECR, right? So look at what it's doing here. It will be pushing it out to our ECR repository. We have two repositories. We have the repository for the controller agents, or for the controller image, and we have the repository. We'll also build and push an image to where, and we'll build and push an image to the Jenkins agent. So we have two images, right? The first one up there and this second one down here. That's all what we're doing in this file. So we're simply, this is the file, the ECR file, where we have our ECR repository defined. Then this file is basically the resources for our ECS clusters, right? So we have the ECS cluster resource here, and this one is called the controller. This one is called the agents. And down here, we are simply defining the various resources that will come with this, right? So you see, we are defining the type, which is Fargate, and the capacity, and we're defining all of those details down here. And we have the Jenkins, these controller task definitions. They will use all these values here, which we are passing down in here, right? So you can see all of them. They will be encrypted. The image will be using the repository that we defined above. The memory utilization will come from the Jenkins controller. We'll use a volume from EFS, and we'll be mounting that up into it using the EFS ID, and it has to be encrypted. And then we are defining the container path. This part, if you go into the EFS folder, you should be able to see this if you mount to that EFS environment. EFS is a service in AWS. It's a storage service in AWS that is shared, right? You can share within a network. You can share your EFS. You can mount any machine, and you'll still see the same files in your EFS devices, right? All right. And then these are the types of things that, the types of capabilities that we need. We need Fargate, and this needs to be in a network and in an AWS VPC, and all of these memory requirements that have been defined down here. We've also defined the memory capabilities. We've enabled encryption in transit and all of that, right? And also these are the controller configuration. So we have configurations for the controller and configurations for the agent. And then here is our EFS. So this is the EFS, where EFS is created, right? I just talked to you about it above. EFS is Elastic File System, right? The AWS Elastic File System, service. The Elastic File Service. Let me see. Let me make sure that's the right thing I'm saying. It's Elastic File. Let's see. AWS EFS. AWS EFS. Storage. Amazon Elastic File System. Yes, Elastic File System. So we're correct in saying that. It's an Elastic File System, and it's able to scale, right? It scales and scales and scales depending on your workload. So all the jobs that we'll be storing will be living in this file system. And then these are the Elastic load balancers that will be creating the endpoint, or the DNS endpoint is what we will use to access Jenkins, right? So we're defining the ports and everything that we need, right? It's an application load balancer. We're creating it here. And then this is the target group that we're creating down here. You know about the target group and the various ports that we're opening. Port 80 here for our application. And the listener will be listening on port 80, and we have a forwarding role that we are creating down here. And also we need access, right? So we need to create IAM roles. So this is a role that we're creating, and you have this type of access. You have list clusters, list containers, and so on, get roles, pass role, stop task, run task, and so on. We need these permissions, these IAM permissions, to be able to so we need permissions for what? We need permissions for our controller, for the cluster, our controller. We need permissions for our agent cluster. We need permissions for EFS, right? So we need all those permissions to be able to run these things. And then the execution role is just defined here, right? So the resource is an IAM role. This is the role that we're creating. So this role will be attached to our various resources. And the assume role is attached as well, because other services will be using it. And then we've defined our provider here, and down here is our security groups, the various security groups that are needed for all these services, right? We've defined the various services. All of them need security groups. So Jenkins ALB needs the security group, but 80 open for it, so that we'll be able to access our applications. Egress will allow everything for egress, because it's internet facing, right? And then our security group for the Jenkins agents, this is how it looks. And we've just defined that. And then security group for the Jenkins controller, this is how it looks. Nobody should be having access to it, and that's why we're tying it down with all of these things here. Though the egress is open, we can go out to get internet access to it, right? And that's why we've defined all of this here. So that's basically our Terraform code. This one is just the tfvars file, which is defining the variables and the values, right? US East one, the VPC ID that we're using, the Jenkins controller port, Jenkins agent port, and then the various subnets where we want this thing to run, and the CPU the capacity that we want to use for the controller, and the memory itself. So that's what is defined here, and here is the variable file. This is the variable file where the variables are created and then used here, right here. So that's basically how the code looks. So in a nutshell, this serverless architecture is helping. It's a really complex one, but it puts a Jenkins environment that is really, really very neat, right, guys? And it's cost effective. That means once an agent is once you run a job in your Jenkins, once you run a pipeline and you run the job, after the job completes, it destroys the agent, and you don't worry about the agent anymore. The agent is gone, but your data remains in your pipeline remains. Your pipeline doesn't go because it is stored in a safe place called EFS, right? That's what we used down here. We created EFS here to store our data. And of course, how would you build that? Those agents and all of those, you're building them, you're hosting them in ECS, which is the Elastic Container Service, right? So it is AWS Container Service. It uses Docker, and that's why we're having these Docker files. We're building using images, and we're building and storing these images in ECR, which is AWS a tool that is used to store images. It's equivalent to Docker Hub, for those who know about Docker Hub, where you store images of an application. So we are simply bottling up an application, or call it building it. It has plugins. We are simply building a Jenkins environment, right, which is called controller here, and a Jenkins jobs environment, which is called this other one here. So there are two images that we'll build, and we'll create two repositories, two ECR repositories to push those images to, and then we'll pull those images and use them to build our Jenkins environment. That's basically all what we're doing, guys. So if you want to run this, you need to be in this folder called Jenkins ECS, which is this one right here, right? So we have this one. You have to be inside this to run this. And remember, you need to have you need to have credentials set up in your environment. So you need to do AWS configure and create, grant yourself permissions to the user that you created. So you know how to do that. You just do AWS configure and you put the secret key and the secret access key. That user should have permissions to run all of these things. I just gave my user admin permissions. So you can grant yourself admin permissions, or you grant ECS permissions, or ECS full permissions, grant EFS full permission, grant ECR full permission, and what else? Those are the main services that you will be using in this tutorial, right? All right, so guys, let's get after it. So what do we want to do now? We want to initialize our environment. So we'll do Terraform init and initialize our environment, and we're building our backend. Our backend is local, right? So our backend is local. I think this one, you could create a backend in your AWS environment, create a bucket and create a DynamoDB table. It'll just leave the DynamoDB table and it will store your state file in your environment. So you will need to uncomment this if you want to store it in AWS. But mine will be stored here. So you see, I'll have mine stored here. That's why you see the state file here, because I ran this earlier to prepare for this video, right? And so you have a back end here if you don't enable this. All right, so now you can plan just to see what will be created, to see the number of resources that will be created once you run this. So I'll just run Terraform plan, right? So we look at what will be created once we run this. So run that, it will plan, and then it will bring a state file for you. So once you run plan, it brings a state file. You see, it says 29 resources will be created. 29. If you roll up and down here, you see the resources that will be created, right? All these resources that we've named above. So you see, it will go and create a log group. You go and create a stream, log stream. You go and create log streams again for Jenkins agent, and all of these resources. You can see all the resources here, guys. So currently in AWS, we don't have any of these resources. All right, so if everything looks good for you, you can then just run the Terraform apply to create this. I'll just run Terraform apply -- auto approve, since I don't want to be saying yes when I run this. So let's run this, and it will take some time to create the resources in AWS. So you see, it started creating those log streams that we saw in our plan. It's still creating the Jenkins. It's going to our local and creating, using that file to build the image. You can see what it's doing there. It's building an image and it's pushing it up to that ECR environment. So it's creating our Jenkins agent is still creating it, and it's pushed that image up. You see, it's doing, the creation is complete there. You can see as it's going, right? You can see that it's creating a storage environment and it's mounting it. You see mount storage, EFS mount. So it's creating a mount storage point, and it's done that, and it's creating the Jenkins controller. It's created and it's pushing it up there, guys. All right, let's give it a moment and see what happens. Let's hope if it doesn't fail. If it fails, we'll figure out what's happening. But I think through the practice session, through the preparation session, not practice session, you should have a clean environment here. All right, so let's let it run. So if you go into AWS, we'll discover that some services are starting to show up, right? So if you go into AWS, we'll log into our AWS account. You see that a repository will be created. So currently there was no repository. You see that a repository has been created, a Jenkins agent repository and a Jenkins controller has been created. And this one has an image already, which means the image has been built and pushed. This one has not been pushed yet. So if we keep refreshing, the image will be pushed eventually. So it's still creating. It's not created a controller image. So it's creating the controller image. It will create it and then it will push it out, and you will see the image available once it pushes it out. Once it says done, right? It's the image that is creating. That image is bigger. You remember the image was the Jenkins, this image here. This image was just one liner, right? But this one is bigger. This one is bigger. So you see it does a lot of things, and then it pushes it out. And Before that, quick thing that I forgot to mention, I created a user in AWS and a user and a password. So you need to go to AWS and go to Secret Manager and create a Jenkins user and a Jenkins password. I just did that before this video. So you need to have a Jenkins user and a Jenkins password, and you pass a password there. So look at, if we go to our AWS environment and go to Secrets Manager, go to Secrets Manager, you see that I've created the user this way. So the user, this is how it will look. I want to retrieve the secret. So Jenkins user, right? You have to create this Jenkins user and give it a user, and Jenkins pass, you give it a password. This is how I created mine. So we use this admin and this password to log into our Jenkins once it is created. Very important, guys. Don't miss this step. If you miss it, you will not be able to log into your Jenkins environment once it's created. You see, this Jenkins, you have to create it in AWS. Make sure of that. All right, so my controller agent or my controller is building. So the image is being built. Very soon you have an image in that AWS environment. So if you go back to ECS or ECR, so if you go back to ECR, we should see that there is something that will be coming up here very soon. So still yet no agent is still creating. Let's give it a moment for it to create. While the other services that will be created, right? There are other services. Remember, I told you there's an EFS environment that will be created where your jobs will be stored. Now, the Jenkins serverless EFS has been created. You see, you can actually attach this to any machine. You could attach it to a Linux machine by copying this and creating an EFS folder and running this, and you'll be connected to this file system. So it is an elastic file system. All the jobs that we will be creating will be stored in this file system. Also, if you go to ECS, you should see two ECS, sorry, not. You should see two clusters. One cluster is the Jenkins serverless agents, and the other cluster is the Jenkins serverless controller. Remember, we said there are two clusters that will be created. One is the controller, and one is the agent for the agent. So this one will run the controller image. Remember that image that we talked about, and this other one would be running the agents. Nothing currently will be running in here right now. Nothing, you will not see any task that will be running in here, right? No task. But once you start a job, once you build a job in Jenkins, you will see that the task will appear. And when the job ends, the task will get finished. It will be destroyed, right? Because it's serverless. You don't need to know where the server is coming from, but it's just using a server somewhere. It runs, deletes everything. So our image needs to be built and pushed out. So this image has taken long to build. Normally, it shouldn't take this long to build this image. Don't know what is failing here. But let's give it time because it's not set that it's not building. And I think I can deduce that my Docker environment is probably full. So this is building on your local Docker environment, right? You can see images here. These are some of the images that it's building. So this one is in use. I've built Jenkins agent. This is for the Jenkins agent. This is what it builds and pushes out. And then the Jenkins controller. This is the controller. I think it's the latest. No, this one was built about 2 hours ago. This is the one I was practicing, or I was preparing for this video. So it hasn't built a new one. So no, this one was built 2 years ago. So I did some of this even 2 years back, and I haven't deleted it. I need to go in and delete some of these things. All right, so let's see what's happening here. So guys, I'll just pause this video here and wait a moment for this to build and push, and then we'll continue from there, guys. I'll just do a pause on this recording. So not stopping, but pausing. All right, so I think it passed that stage where it was just hanging and it's building and pushing the image. Now you see it's beginning to push images, the controller image. So let's go up to AWS very soon. It should be done pushing and we should see a an image for sorry, let's go to ECR again, ECR. And we should see an image for the controller, which is available in that repository because it's already started pushing. So this is the repository. Currently no image, so I hope it's pushing. Let's see. So the push is occurring. It's creating the controller still. So let's give it a couple of moments again. So it's doing the build and push. This is taking a longer time than usual. I don't know why, but probably space limitations here. So I can delete some things here, the older things. I can delete this one about 1 year ago. Delete for okay, delete. All right, so it's created all our resources. It's complete. If we go refresh now, guys, we should be able to explore our environment here really nicely, right? So I think, voila, we have an agent, guys. We have an agent. Now let's go to ECS as a service. So we go to ECS, which is Amazon Elastic Container Service, and see the two clusters. You see, there is a pending job. There's a pending task right here under the Jenkins serverless controller. So you see the task. The task is beginning to pop up, or the service. This is a Jenkins service, right? So it's created a Jenkins service. This service will always be available. This one will not be deleted after a job is run because all the Jenkins configurations are saved in this one, right? All the Jenkins environment is saved in this one through that Jenkins image which we built. Remember that image? And then it has a task that is already running. This task will keep running because it needs it for that Jenkins service to be deployed, right? And so this is the deployment is still showing we need one task to be running out of one, right? So it's still pending. So the deployment and tasks are still pending. Let's give it a moment. Once this is done running, once this turns green, we'll need to go to our load balancers. And in our load balancers, guys, you will just see how our Jenkins environment should be up and ready to go. You see that we used Fargate, right? That's the infrastructure type we used called Fargate. It is just a type of an EC2 instance that AWS provisions for you. Now our image is one-on-one. Successful, guys, successful. Now we can go to our load balancer and get the endpoint. So let me just go to this screen here and cancel and go to load balancers. So if you go to load balancers, EC2 dashboard, load balancers, you will see a Jenkins serverless application load balancer. And this is a load balancer. And if you copy this endpoint here, you should be able to access your Jenkins environment using this endpoint as we are expecting. Our fingers crossed. We hope that this works for us. All right, so it takes some time for our Jenkins thing to. All right, this is your Jenkins environment. Who is familiar with this view? Who is familiar with this view? You should know this already. If you're a Jenkins fan out there, if you're a Jenkins guy out there, you already know this view. And remember the passwords we created in AWS. So I showed you if you go to the secrets manager, I showed you a password and a user name and a password that we created. That's the username and password that are needed in that login screen right there. So you just come here, copy this one and paste. Go back, copy this one, the password, and bring it in and paste. Remember, you created those before. I told you to create those before. You can just say sign me on there. And guys, I'm logged in. I am logged in. This is our complete Jenkins environment. This right here is hosted on that ECS controller. Remember that controller? This is the controller. Nothing yet about the Jenkins agent cluster. Nothing yet. Once we build a job here, that job, the data about that job will be stored in will be stored, like that job itself as it's building, it will be built using a Jenkins agent, because the controller will tell the system, the Jenkins system, that hey, I have a job that is coming. Can you schedule me a runner? I need a runner. I need an environment. I need a computing system to run this job, right? And then it will ECS will serverlessly pull up an instance from anywhere, right? Where AWS is provisioning those resources, and run your application. And then after the application, after the job is run, it will terminate it. That's how it works. All right. So to test this out, let's create. So let me show you something within the ECS environment. So notice that there's no task running here. You don't have a task running here. There's nothing. You see this one, no task, no service, nothing, empty, right? Now let's go back and create a job. Let's create a pipeline job here and give it a name, test job. Test job. Use this type pipeline, and then hit this. We'll create this job and run it. So down here, want to put some basic code. Let's get some basic code that I put here. It's just a hello world basic code for so this is a simple pipeline script. So just copy that. I'll share this snippet with you. You can just get it and bring it to your Jenkins. No, not this one. This is a test one that I did. This Jenkins environment here, and paste it. Just paste it here. So this is a pipeline. This is a hello world thing that you just want to run, and apply and save. Right? So you have a job just built. You see, we have started a job. See what it's doing. It is already started by there is no node for it to run on. See what it will say. There's no node. So it's looking. It's trying to get an agent. So it will be knocking at the door of ECS to get an agent. ECS will go. You see, still waiting to schedule task, waiting for the next available executor. So it's waiting. It takes some time to wait for an executor. Now let's go back to this. You see, AWS has started provisioning there was nothing here, right? But AWS now has noticed that, hey, there's a task that is being scheduled by the controller. So I need to have an agent to run for me. You see, it's provisioning it. It's quick. It's very quick. It's provisioning. It's gathering resources and bringing them together very quickly. Now it's running. So if you go back here, if you go back to your test, you see that it started running and it's successful. Once this job has completed running, you see it simply displayed hello world here. It completed running. It used that agent to run. This is the agent ID. Remember this agent ID? It's not opening like that. That's okay. The Jenkins agent ID ends with 320, right? I think that one should already be destroyed. This is the agent. So if I do this, it's gone. That job has ended and it's gone. Guys, you can see the beauty of serverless. Now you don't have to worry about the cost of this. That is already gone. It is already gone. You just have a bare, empty Jenkins cluster that is sitting here. No jobs running, nothing. So you're not spending money. And that's it. This is beautiful, guys. If you understand how Jenkins works, there are some limitations with this that you need to customize a little bit. You need that code to be modified and all that. So if you come to your jobs, you have one job that is available to you. This job, the data is always available. Where is the data stored? The data is stored on EFS. So if you go to EFS basically had just 6 gigabytes of things sitting there, right? But now there's data in it because there's something that is stored. It can't even recognize this one. This one is too small, so that you see it has just small data stored in it, right? It has just small data stored. Total size is still 6 kilobytes. If we run another job, maybe let's just create another job and just call it this and just call it startup marketplace. I have a startups marketplace for you if you are an organization that is looking, you're building your stuff and you're looking to sell that small startup that is making money already. Just go to startups.io and list your service there. Come in here, create an account and list your service so you can see some that are sold out. List your application, whatever startup it is, just create an account with us and you can start leveraging our platform. Just need to go here and register, right? You create an account for yourself and you should be able to do that. There are different categories. Maybe you're dealing in databases, community startups, or e-commerce startups, mobile apps, or whatever, right? And you're already making money. It's about those startups that are already making money. It's just you're not bringing any type of startup guys, startups that are making some money already. So you need to list it in our platform and we should help you get those buyers out there. All right, so you could give it that name and hit this and then go down and create your pipeline. So we'll just use a pipeline script. We'll just paste the script that we had and apply, and we have a pipeline and you build. Once you build, what happens? Once you build, you go back to ECS. Let's go back to our ECS. And you see this one is still available. And this one has nothing running. It has nothing running because that job is still starting. Now, very soon, if you refresh, very soon, look at it's provisioning infrastructure for you. It's provisioning a node for you. It's provisioning an instance for you to use for this job that is running, right? So if you pull the job up, you should see that it's still waiting. You see, oh, sorry, the console output is still waiting. It's waiting and waiting to get a node. That node is still provisioning, right? It's still coming up. And so you really just have to wait a couple of seconds for this to provision and build and push your thing. And here you are, successful as usual. So this is the job. You refresh, it's gone. It's gone, guys. So, guys, this architecture right here it looks complex, but it's really simple if you understand it. If you understand the concept of Jenkins agent and the concept of Jenkins controller, it is a serverless way. AWS has put a serverless method for you to deploy a Jenkins environment, and we are simply using Terraform. You could do it anyway, right? We're simply using Terraform to go about that deployment. And so you have these two articles, which I will share with you. You can read through it just to understand what this is all about. This is the AWS one. So from the details here, you can already see that Jenkins, you use serverless Jenkins environment using Fargate. You can read just to understand what it does, right? You see the Jenkins controller URL is backed by an application load balancer. We recommend using AWS certificate. We didn't use a certificate because this is just a demo for demo purposes, but you could add that part of it if you are completing this for your work environment. And then you use a VPC. The Jenkins controller runs as a service in Amazon ECS using Fargate as the launch type. This is what we did. Jenkins uses the Amazon ECS Fargate plugin. That's the plugin you saw us install. They'll give you some of these details. And this is how they created theirs with this Terraform. They will just, I think they built theirs even manually here. But this guy, Matt Little, he did a good job in this 10 minutes video. You see an applause for him for doing that. And he put really nice content here, and that's I just used the tool to get this tutorial going on. All right, guys, that's it from me to you. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Primus Veku. Please do not hesitate to subscribe to our channel, share our channel with your friends, help us grow this channel, and we welcome your comments, guys. Be nice. nice with those comments. Share those comments with us. It will not it will not kill. Let's build this platform together. If you have recommendations on what you want us to work on next, please don't hesitate to share with us, and we will be glad to make a video about that, or maybe a technology or something that you have a challenge with. Just let us know. We have our implementation subsidiary, which is Primus Cloud Solutions, and we are always available to help build anything that you are facing challenges or migrate, or anything in DevOps or AWS architecting, or anything within the cloud space. That's our expertise. Thanks guys for watching, and it's bye bye from me.